Heartbreak House is a play penned by George Bernard Shaw. It was published in 1919 and made its stage debut at Garrick Theatre in 1920. The story unfolds as Ellie Dunn, accompanied by her father and fiancé, receives an invitation to one of Husseini Hushabai's notorious dinner parties. This extravagant gathering takes place in the eccentric home of Ellie's father, Captain Shotover, a man well into his 80s and an inventor striving to develop a psychic ray capable of neutralizing dynamite. Captain Shotover's residence is an architectural marvel, resembling the stern of a ship. Upon Ellie's arrival at the house, she finds herself alone with no one to welcome her. She takes refuge in reading William Shakespeare until she eventually drifts off to sleep. It is at this moment that Nurse Guinness, an elderly servant, stumbles upon Ellie just before the arrival of another guest. This new arrival is Lady Utterwood, Captain Shotover's younger daughter, who has returned from Australia after an absence of 23 years. However, her own father pretends not to recognize her. The hostess of the party, Mrs. Hushabai, who is Captain Shotover's eldest daughter, has orchestrated the gathering with a specific purpose in mind. Her aim is to dissuade Ellie from marrying Boss Mangan, a wealthy industrialist and Ellie's fiancé. Mangan initially befriended Ellie's father, Mazzini Dunn, and even provided him with financial assistance to start his own business. Unfortunately, Dunn's venture floundered within 2 years, leading Mangan to purchase the business and transform it into a lucrative enterprise, with Dunn working as a manager. Mrs. Hushabai opposes the union, believing that Ellie should marry out of love rather than obligation due to her father's debt. During a conversation with Mrs. Hushabai, Ellie confides in her, revealing a secret infatuation with a mysterious man she recently encountered, an enigmatic romantic adventurer named Marcus Darnley. However, when Mrs. Hushabai's husband, Hector, enters the room, Ellie is stunned to realize that he is the same man she knew as Darnley. He had been weaving intricate tales of daring adventures, embroidering them with exaggerations, all in an attempt to impress Ellie and win her favor. However, Ellie is left heartbroken and seething with anger at Hector for deceiving her and betraying both his wife and her friend. Mrs. Hushabai steps in to offer solace to Ellie, explaining that heartbreak is often life's way of imparting valuable lessons. Shortly after, Boss Mangan arrives on the scene, and Captain Shotover makes a dire prediction that Mrs. Hushabai will ensure the union between Ellie and Mangan never takes place. Mangan is shattered by this revelation. As if on cue, Randall Utterword, Lady Utterword's brother-in-law, arrives at the house, having invited himself after learning of Lady Utterword's stay there. At the same time, Hector lays eyes on Lady Utterword and is instantly smitten, setting in motion his own heartbreak. After a dinner filled with tension, Mangan confesses to Ellie that he deliberately ruined her father's business. He had provided Dunn with funds to start the venture, fully aware it would fail, viewing it as a cost-effective way to venture into a new business. Strangely, Ellie declares her willingness to proceed with the marriage, even though she knows Mangan's heart truly belongs to Mrs. Hushabai, and she herself harbors affections for Hector. Her reasoning revolves around gaining access to Mangan's wealth, viewing it as a form of retribution for her father. Ellie issues a chilling ultimatum to Mangan, threatening to ensure he never sees Mrs. Hushabai again if he calls off the marriage. Overwhelmed by the idea, Mangan collapses into a nearby chair, all while the group openly discusses him, unaware he can overhear every word. Suddenly, a gunshot reverberates from upstairs, causing alarm. Hector and Dunn apprehend a burglar in the act of stealing Mrs. Hushabai's precious jewels. Captain Shotover identifies the intruder as a pirate named Billy Dunn. Ellie discreetly draws Captain Shotover aside and confides in him, confessing that she would rather marry him than Mangan. After her departure, Hector and Randall engage in a candid conversation about their ardent affections for Mrs. Utterword, each vying for her heart, but it becomes evident that she has left them both heartbroken. Later that evening, Mangan reveals a startling truth to the group: he possesses very little wealth and merely manages affairs for other investors. Ellie, upon hearing this, announces her resolute decision not to marry him, admitting that she had never truly intended to go through with their marriage plans. Shockingly, she declares that she has, in fact, married Captain Shotover earlier that same evening. As the group discusses these revelations, a distant explosion rumbles, signaling an ongoing bombing raid. Nurse Guinness hurriedly directs everyone to seek shelter in the cellar. Meanwhile, Hector illuminates the entire house, inadvertently making it a prime target during the raid. Once the air raid subsides, most of the group emerges unscathed, although Ellie appears disappointed with the return to the mundane rhythms of life. Both Mrs. Hushabye and Ellie express a peculiar desire for the planes to return. Ellie, reflecting on the disappointments endured by herself and others throughout the day, decides to rename the residence Heartbreak House. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.